welcome to episode 1 of Cracking the Codex. I am Edward. I'm joined by John Scrivens, player extraordinaire, head coach for Wales WTC team. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, not bad at all.
Fantastic. We're here to talk about some Marines. We're going to be going through all of the detachments. We should be getting one of these out every week for you. And we're going to start off with probably the most interesting one, the Vanguard Detachment. I know it's the one that you're most excited about. It's probably not the most clearly strong, especially with the points changes that we've seen this morning. But I think it's one of the most interesting ones. It's one that I've got my eye on.
Yeah, certainly. It's a lot of shenanigans.
Absolutely. And we'll when we get to the list that we've pulled together at the end, we'll definitely have some tools for those shenanigans. So if you're in the Vanguard detachment, it gives you the bonus of the old Raven Guard detachment. You get the benefit of cover, which is always nice, fairly easy to get hold of in 10th edition, but you also get -1 to hit. Obviously, with 10th edition being the addition of less rerolls, that is something that's actually meaningful. I know, we say less rerolls with a bit of a smirk, but I think there is less rerolls, especially to hit. A lot of the rerolls seem to come in sort of reroll 1s to wound or something along those lines.
And an interesting one here is it's specifically -1 to hit and not gaining stealth.
It
means if someone's on a
hit.
+1 to hit against you and you've got stealth and this, it counteracts each other, which is nice.
It is good. Obviously, a lot of the synergy in there is the sort of scout units that might be ending up with stealth in another way. So being able to double stack those against a lot of the +1 hits is a strong ability to have. All right, so strat-wise, something key to note is all of the Space Marines detachments have a lot of battle tactic stratagems. That's important because you can use your free stratagems to make them cheap. If you're running captains, you can run any of the top 3 here as a free one. You can double up on them. Always good to have, especially with Armor of Contempt being such a strong strat. It's a really strong defensive tool to have, especially when you're stacking it with that ability to get cover at any time as well. So Armor of Contempt, I think we all know what that one is. The -1 to AP of incoming attacks. Fantastic. Probably going to windmill slam that every turn if you can. Next up is Strike from the Shadows. This is a really solid one at 1 CP, another battle tactic. You pick one unit that hasn't shot, one infantry unit. They get +1 ballistic skill and +1 to their armor penetration. So this is the double whammy. The only downside is you have to pick a unit that is over 12 inches away from the unit that it's shooting at. What do you think of this one, John?
Yeah, to me, like my go-to shooting units generally these days tend to be in an infantry body. So Hellblasters, aggressors with Boltstorm, gauntlets, and then even things like Inceptors. Probably not the optimum one, but
at 1
it's
CP,
all in that same body. It's useful. So
yeah, that's going to really turbocharge the Boltstorm Inceptors as well. Actually, taking them up to that AP2 makes a big difference. Lovely stuff. All right, finally in the battle tactics, we've got Surgical Strikes. This one I'm a little less hot on. It's 2 CP. You pick one infantry unit that hasn't fought, and you can give your melee weapons precision. Sometimes that's going to be good, but that's a hefty price to pay to try and snipe out a character.
Yes, which a lot of the time, I think with how I would be building lists for this, you wouldn't need the precision because the unit should be enough of a hammer that the unit and the character should just disappear.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be fringe chimes the way you want to use this. If you come up against the Necron bricks with the characters, if you want to try and pick those out, that's something. Yeah. But yeah, most of the time it's nice to have in the back pocket, but not something you're going to need a lot. Moving on to the non-battle tactics. So you can't double up on these and you can't reduce their cost. You've got a deadly prize. So this is at the start of the command phase, and you pick an infantry or mounted unit within range of an objective you control. So you can't move on to it to do this. And basically you sabotage the objective, and every time an enemy unit ends on that, so it's normal, advance, fallback, or charge move, on a 2+ on a D6, they take D3 mortal wounds. That is cute. You can definitely, I think the place that I see this being more useful is sort of turn 4 coming into turn 5. You're both playing with very small units, you whittle down. Maybe the opponent, to take you off, has to move onto it and then charge you, so they're risking taking 2d3 mortal wounds. It's definitely more of a tech piece.
Yeah, and it does trigger off of things like squad tactics or phantasm because you're doing a normal move in both cases. So
yeah,
it would still trigger even if they're trying to bypass it and they can't. So I think it's handy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would trigger on units getting out of transports as well, which is just funny, really. Not going to come up much, but you'll be pleased when it does. Calculated Fate, another 1 CP. This is after an enemy unit declares a charge phase. So this is sort of like the big draw to the detachment, I think. This is the one that really makes the whole detachment tick. You target one of your units that's been declared a target as a charge, and they make a normal move of D6 or 6 inches if they're phobos or scouts. So you can't do it if you're in combat already. But yes, obviously people have been talking about overlapping multiple units so that the enemy has to declare both targets. Then you spend a CP, you fall back, you leave them so it's a viable target of the charge. You're still within the 12 inches, but they can't complete the charge because you're now fully behind the unit that they have declared. Because they haven't made both charges that they declared, they don't get to move at all. I'm not sure how realistic that is to pull off, but even just being able to move, a brick of aggressors D6 inches away from a World Eater's unit that's trying to make a 6-inch charge, it's great. A lot of tactical play with it as well. In your opponent's charge phase, getting onto an objective, something along those lines.
So I found a similar thing's been useful with in Gladius Detachment with the squad tactics, but that is only in their movement phase. So having something in the charge phase gives you that shenanigans again, which is, I think, is nice and can be swingy, but very fun if you can pull it off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're running this detachment, you want to be running a lot of Phobos and Scouts. So I think a lot of the time you're just going to get that guaranteed 6 inches. It's also going to dissuade people from coming to try and charge you a lot of the time because you can say, look, I know you can get a 5-inch charge, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to move these models 6 inches. So you're going to go for an 11. And then they don't even go for it, and you just get to keep your unit. Last of all, we've got Guerrilla Tactics. This is a banger. Great for the tactical play, trying to make the most of scoring on the new missions. It's end of your opponent's fight phase, pick up to 2 Phobos or Scout squads or 1 other infantry unit, put them into strategic reserves, and they have to be more than 3 inches away from enemy models. How are you feeling about this one?
So it fixes the problem I have with Scouts a lot of the time, where I get them out of dodge, they're not in combat, but they're within 6. So then they don't get to use what I've got them in the list for. So this kind of helps give that flexibility to them, and to say your lovely brick of infiltrators with a librarian on them that you're like, okay, if they charge them, I'm in trouble. If they get too close, these guys are in trouble. But if I just lift them, and if they survived, I can then put them somewhere more useful, say turn 4-5, and there's objectives you can just slap onto. It's so handy to be able to go, right, I've still got something on that back objective. They didn't need to be there. This utility can be put somewhere else, and that will score me points. And if it's a 5-point swing or 4-point swing of primary end game, great.
Absolutely. It's a great one. Onto the enhancements. So these are pretty solid as well. There's 2 that definitely stand out to me. Starting off with the Blade Driven Deep. This is an infantry model only, and while the bearer is leading a unit, models in that unit have the infiltrator ability. Wow! I wonder what we're going to put that on. I think there's a short list, and the short list is about 2 units, but both of those units really want to be up in someone else's grill.
Yes. So the first thing I saw there was I went Deathwing Knights, that famously stealthy forward deploying unit. I just want to shove them down someone's throat and see if they can deal with it. So it's perfect.
Yeah, it's fun as well because you don't have to put them on the line. You can put them on the line if your opponent doesn't have any way of dealing with them. But if you didn't want to do that, you could example just set them up on an objective on a flank and say, if you're going to shoot me, I'm, -1 to hit. I've got the benefit of cover. If you don't want to shoot me, maybe I'll just pick up the unit at the end of the turn and I'll come and deal with you, on my turn anyway.
It's very much a deterrent, really, as much as anything. Like, your opponent might then deploy really overly defensive just because there's that potential, especially if it's your last drop of your deployment.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. There's a lot of making your opponent have to make the best of the bad decisions in this detachment, which I quite enjoy. Definitely putting the pressure on them to make the right choices is always fun. We've also got Ghost Weave Cloak. Give a unit stealth and lone operative. I will say I'm not really sure why they're getting stealth, because that's -1 to hit over 12 inches, right?
Yes.
And then the lone operative.
No, stealth you get anyway, because you gain that on a Phobos librarian. If you
Sure. My point is more like it feels like an odd combination to hand out on one ability because they can't shoot you from over 12 inches. because
I
of the
think
lone operative.
I think it's not limited to more than 12. I think.
Okay, fair enough.
But I think
Um,
that might be it, but yeah, it's all good.
but anyway, this is fantastic. This is. Have you been playing against Eldar? Have you seen the Eldar character that
Yeah,
just yeets around and is a
I'm
lone
really
operative?
jealous.
Yeah,
I'm really
it's not
jealous.
quite that good. It's still pretty good.
No.
But there's a snazzy new jump pack captain model. Do you think that might be a place that this is going to go by any chance?
I feel like that's the target. That, or
Yeah.
if you're really short of points, maybe putting it on the chaplain with jump pack if you're really trying to
Oh, yeah.
scrape points, because he's 30 points cheaper, I think. But
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Either or, then it doesn't seem to make much difference. Obviously, you get more use out of the captain in the late game. You've got some actual killing power there, but very nice. Execute and redeploy. Phobos unit. After that unit has shot, you get to make a normal move of up to 6 inches. You can't charge afterwards, and you can't move more than once in the shooting phase. But this is just a good old, strike and fade. Given that it has to go on Phobos units, you're not doing the Tau thing of move out, delete an army, move back in.
no.
But it's great for positional play.
So the big one I found when using infiltrators with a Phobos librarian attached is you'll want to get them out so you can use a smite, because it's quite a powerful attack to get out. Once you've done it, if you don't quite kill the unit you've been targeting, you're in the open. So being able to kind of correct that, very, very nice.
Nice. Yeah. So you hadn't thought of it, but a good one to have in the back pocket. Finally, we've got Shadow War Veteran. So this is Phobos model only. And it's the Agent's Effect. You pick one strat that your opponent uses. After they use it, any subsequent uses of that stratagem have to be an additional CP. Obviously limited to battle tactic strats only. It's good. It's cheaper than putting a Caladius Assassin in. Although, I'll be honest,
Sure.
I might just put the Caladius Assassin if I wanted to go down that sort of pathway, because they've got a lot of utility to go up into the sky, do some actions for you.
Yeah, because anybody you'd put on this onto, it'd probably be around the same sort of points without that sort of the full utility pack, unfortunately.
Yeah. You could take both. I don't think you do, now that it's limited to battle tactics only, but it's definitely an option. The Vect ability definitely has fallen out of favor a little bit now that it's only battle tactics, but Marines have a lot of really good battle tactics, so it might be something that picks up a bit of value again. Be interesting to see how that one goes. So moving on to the list. This isn't necessarily the list that you're going to see at tournaments, but I think it's a good example of what the list might look like, what sort of direction you want to go into. And I think John and I both agree that Dark Angels is probably the way that you want to go, because out of all of the units that you can forward deploy, I think the one that you get the most value out of is the Deathwing Knights. Yes, it is a disgustingly expensive quarter of your army, but they're incredibly hard to kill, and if they get there, they will blend most things. They really do just put the pain into the enemy. So, character-wise, we've started off with the Apothecary Biologist. Doesn't have Bolter Discipline, still very good. Exploding hits on 6s is now incredibly valuable, now that the rerolls to wound part of Oath of Moment has gone away. So we want to have that as much as possible. He's going with the aggressors in the Land Raider Redeemer. Captain with Jump Pack, taking the Ghostweave Cloak. That is the lone operative and stealthy. He's just there to do some actions. Can pay the CP to put him into reserves. You can move around. You can hold your home objective against enemy whirlwinds or some similar units. The Strike Master has Blade Driven Deep. That is the forward deploy. We decided to go with the Strike Master over the Captain. Having the free stratagem would have been nice, but I think it's more important to get the lethal hits. And just being able to really, go, cool. I'm only strength 6. Don't worry about it. I'm going to hit you. Here's 10 lethal hits. Take some saves. Librarian and Phobos armor. No upgrades here. Just joining the infiltrators gives 1 unit lone operative, basically. Can't be targeted outside of 12 inches. And then unit-wise, we've got the 6 aggressors again, going in the Redeemer. 10 Deathwing Knights, going with the Strike Master, who will be forward deploying. 2 units of 3 Inceptors. We had put those down as plasma, but I actually think I like 1 bolter, 1 plasma, because the strat for +1 to hit and the additional AP. Having a little bit of flexibility there, and honestly, half the time you're not going to shoot them anyway. You just drop them in to do some actions. 2 units of 5 Infiltrators, great for their screening out deep strikes, the 12-inch bubble of you can't land here. 3 units of 5 Scouts, incredibly cheap. Now that they've gone down to 55 points, I think every Marine list starts with 5 of these. And then armor-wise, we've got the Redeemer. Again, going to advance up the board turn 1, sit on an objective, have the aggressors in, cause some problems, and the whirlwind as well, which is, with this being such a good scoring list to try and limit it down, what it lets you do is kill your opponent's units that are also trying to sit behind terrain and just score points. Teleport homers is obviously a fantastic secondary that people might be taking now that people are leaning more towards taking fixed. And it also lets you clear space for the following turn to deep strike your own units in, or strategic reserve your own units in. What was the sort of thought process when you were putting this list together? Because this is sort of the bones of what you might be taking to your next event, isn't it?
Yes. So to me, it was about kind of applying pressure early so that if there's the first turn kind of goes in favor of the list, the Terminators just slam into whatever they've not put too far back in their deployment zone. And then obviously things like the scouts and the infiltrators, if we're playing tactical, they're just wherever they need to be. The whirlwind can obviously sit on the home objective, just doing its thing, screened out by some scouts or even some infiltrators. I don't necessarily think the infiltrators are that crucial for that part. It's maybe having them slightly further up than I normally would have done in Gladius.
Because you've got the whirlwind, which fills a bit of the backfield space,
Yeah.
you can get away with having them a bit further up.
Yeah, and then the captain literally just, if a card's drawn, you need to be in that quarter. He's been picked up the previous turn, gets dropped down in that quarter. Great. So it's just all about utility of kind of mission play with a couple of strike pieces, which I think you could go even more shenanigans driven with it, but without that hammer of the Deathwing Knights, I feel like I'd be a bit frustrated.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's got enough damage in there to keep your opponent honest. I think if you went just pure scoring, you'd struggle to stop someone from just running you over. But there's a lot of things in there that your opponents are going to have to really consider. The Redeemer as well, taking up space in the midboard. If they haven't got a good way of dealing with that, they just don't get to move
everything.
out. Yeah. It's like, oh, you want to walk up and score? No, you don't. You're going to have to commit 2 units every turn. Yeah, no, I like it. I think it's great. Speaking of secondaries, though, tactical and fixed, have you got any, when you were building this, did you have anything in mind for either, or was it sort of a just get some reps in, see how you're going to go with it?
So traditionally, I've been playing tactical with similar sort of lists. I think I still would try tactical, but I think this could do teleport homers and maybe even engage quite well.
Yeah, or cleanse
and that
if
way,
you wanted to play
and
like
cleanse. So anything passive that requires kind of that positioning being utilized, I think is useful. So
yeah, I think I'd be tempted to start off with tactical for this, mostly because you've got enough pieces to do pretty much any objective that you want, that you can draw on the cards, but you'll get the additional CP throughout the course of the game. There's a lot of really good strats in this one, so getting those additional CP feels like a really good value proposition to me. Lovely stuff. Well, thank you for joining me. And this was episode 1. And we'll be back next week looking at, I believe, to be decided. But I'm thinking we should have a look at the Firestorm, because that is, I believe, the second most interesting one.
You had me at Firestorm.